to our Blueprint ASCO 2022 podcast. Wow. The 2022 annual meeting offered so many presentations on the latest research in cancer and care. This year's programme featured over 200 sessions complementing the meeting's theme, Advancing Equitable Cancer Care Through Innovation. It provided all of us with access to the top oncology research, including abstracts, videos, posters, and so many slides. Without question, pharma has made so much progress across multiple investigational programs to help people and their families living with cancer. So many headlines over the, as we'll call it, the UK Jubilee weekend. So thanks for sharing them, Siobhan. Some huge successes, which could, for example, transform the categorisation and treatment of breast cancer. A standing ovation at the ASCO 2022 plenary. And we all hear that practice-changing designation. It's an exciting moment to celebrate the brilliant minds and hard work that really keeps science moving forward. But my mind immediately goes to the changing narrative, I'll call it. Thinking about the actual patients whose encounters with cancers will hopefully be transformed. Patients who understandably grapple with the diagnosis can grasp onto more tangible hope. Doctors who get to feel confident offering good news with authentic optimism. That is why conferences like ASCO or like these are so important. Sharing the data as science evolves helps us all realise that we're all taking a very real steps into changing the future of cancer. Let's delve in. So I've got two of our wonderful directors here from Blueprint. I've got Lindsay Widger and Siobhan Davies, and we're going to be sharing some of the key highlights of this year's conference. Starting with yourself, Siobhan, tell us about the highlights of this year's conference.
We should definitely start with the Destiny Breast 04 paper. Like you said, Carolyn, this paper received a standing ovation and certainly one of the longest applauses I've heard. The trial examined T-DXd and HER2 in HER2-low metastatic breast cancer, an area that previously HER2-directed therapies have been unsuccessful. The outcomes were really impressive, with almost a doubling of PFS and OS extending by over 6 months versus physicians' choice of chemotherapy in the hormone receptor positive group. And similar results were shown in the full trial population that also included a small number of triple negative breast cancer patients. This data is really expected to change practice, both in terms of how patients are classified and also establishing T-DXd as standard of care for these patients.
Wow. You know, having spent 20 odd years in this industry, I've never heard of a round of applause like it. And it was great to see how much activity physicians have been discussing it on LinkedIn. So phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. A question now, Siobhan. What are the implications, do you feel, for other assets being developed in metastatic breast cancer?
It does seem to have important implications. This data redefines how metastatic breast cancer will be classified, and moving forward we won't be working with a binary classification of HER2 positive, HER2 negative. But there are assets that are currently in development in the HER2 negative space, and now we need to be considering the fact that actually a subset of those might be HER2 low. And so the size of the HER2 negative market has effectively been reduced with this data. One point to note is that the study recruited mainly hormone receptor positive patients, which may result in an indication expansion only for those patients. The exploratory analysis did seem encouraging when looking purely at the triple negative breast cancer population, but with such a small number of patients included, it's difficult to draw definitive conclusions. So products currently indicated for triple negative breast cancer or being developed in that space may be better protected from the impact of Destiny Breast 04.
For sure. Lindsay, what's happening, do you feel, in other areas?
in relapsed refractory multiple myeloma, CARVYKTI is the asset that's really paved the way for CAR T therapies, and that continued to impress with 98% overall response rate after a median follow-up of 28 months. But then to potentially rival CARVYKTI, we heard more about some next generation CAR Ts, as well as impending arrival of BCMA targeted bispecific antibodies.
What did we learn about the bispecifics?
Physicians have eagerly been awaiting these off-the-shelf bispecifics, and promising phase 2 results were presented from teclistamab and elranatamab. Both of these, they employed step-up dosing in their trials, and that's really been effective in reducing CRS events and ICANS relative to the current CAR Ts. However, what became clear is that the path for bispecifics isn't going to be as easy as some may have first considered. So opportunistic infections with bispecifics were higher than what may have been expected. And that really brought the question, how long should bispecifics be administered? Is it until progression, as is common in myeloma today, or should it be for a finite time period? And then secondly, despite on paper bispecifics representing a more convenient solution, the access and delivery of bispecifics may actually be quite challenging. Because of this step-up dosing protocol and the need to monitor patients for cytokine release syndrome, the patients are requiring quite lengthy hospital stays, and this is with uncompensated care. So there's a real uncertainty around the ability of smaller centres to take this on.
How impactful might the new CAR Ts be, do you think, Lindsay?
Still early days, but three different companies presented their phase 1 data, and each of the CAR Ts showed promising efficacy and a more favourable safety profile versus today's CAR Ts, again with lower rates of CRS and neurotoxicity. And it was Oracell's CAR T trial results that caught people's attention. And this one included patients who had previously received a BCMA targeted CAR T. And they actually presented preliminary results of this that showed a benefit in this patient cohort.
Did we learn anything, do you feel, about the sequencing of the BCMA targeted therapies?
Yeah, it's a hot topic, but I think still too early to answer that definitively because the data that was presented is based on such small sample sizes. Some trials suggested slightly inferior outcomes for patients who had previously received a BCMA-directed therapy. The Oracell CAR T trial, that showed comparable outcomes. Overall, signs suggest that retreating against this same BCMA target could be a feasible strategy, and that's good news and definitely an area to closely follow as more data becomes available to us.
Okay, so lots of highlights and really steps forward. Conversely, there were obviously some disappointments. I know there was a lot of waiting to hear about TIGIT.
Yes, this was a session that a lot of the community were waiting for. Thinking back to March this year, we heard that Skyscraper-02 had not met its co-primary endpoint of progression-free survival in extensive stage small cell lung cancer. And then only a few months later, we hear that the same is true for Skyscraper-01 in non-small cell lung cancer. And this is the area where anti-TIGITs had previously shown benefit. So it left a lot of the community considering what the future is for anti-TIGITs, and people were really looking to this session to hopefully provide some answers. What was clear from the session, which was discussing Skyscraper-02, so the trial in extensive stage small cell lung cancer, was that there is no benefit from adding tiragolumab to atezolizumab and chemotherapy in the first-line setting. The numerical difference in progression-free survival was actually worse for the tiragolumab arm. And when asked about biomarker analysis as a means to guide patient selection, Dr. Rudin, who was presenting the results, said he didn't expect it would identify a group in small cell lung cancer who would benefit. One thing, though, that we did learn, which could be a glimmer of hope for tiragolumab in non-small cell lung cancer, was in relation to the statistical analysis plan for Skyscraper-02, because we learned that the majority of the alpha was assigned to overall survival versus progression-free survival. While nobody knows how the statistical analysis has been set up for Skyscraper-01, it has provided some hope that should it be similar, the overall survival endpoint may still show a benefit, despite the news that the progression-free survival endpoint has not been reached.
Any other key learnings? Anything new in non-small cell lung cancer? I saw your post on Crystal 1. Lindsay, anything to comment there?
This year we saw a number of presentations that were reporting on second and third in-class products, and everyone's looking to see if there's anything coming through that could rival the established products. And the Crystal 1 is a good example of this, and that reported on the registrational phase 2 cohort for adagrasib, which is the runner-up to Amgen's Lumakras in the KRAS G12C mutated advanced non-small cell lung cancer. And adagrasib showed promising clinical activity, but it did fail to differentiate versus Lumakras. And in fact, with a poorer toxicity profile, it left questions as to how it'll fare. However, there were 2 presentations for adagrasib, and at the second one, it did show encouraging and durable CNS activity in patients with active untreated CNS metastases. So that might be a potential differentiator for the asset, but Amgen also have their own trial ongoing in that population too.
Another paper that I found interesting was the pembrolizumab plus ramucirumab in advanced non-small cell lung cancer with acquired resistance to immune checkpoint inhibitors. One of the topics that we're often talking about is resistance and how we overcome that. This presentation showed positive outcomes with the PD-L1 VEGFR2 combination in that ICI refractory setting. And this is the first trial in this setting that has shown a survival benefit compared to standard of care without a chemotherapy backbone. There are obviously still questions about the response in patients who received chemo-IO concurrently in the first-line setting, which is standard practice. So we'll have to see how that evolves, but there are plans for phase 3 and definitely something to watch.
Thanks ever so much, Siobhan. Anything else we should be thinking about? Any emerging trends, for example, Lindsay?
One area we've been watching for a while is the movement of checkpoint inhibitors into earlier stages. And last year, Pembro was FDA approved as a neoadjuvant treatment for triple-negative breast cancer. But more and more, the questions being raised as to whether the use of checkpoint inhibitors can result in delaying or potentially avoiding surgery for some patients. And in this year's ASCO, we saw 2 separate presentations, one in dMMR, locally advanced metastatic colorectal cancer, and one in stage 3 B to D melanoma. And these did suggest that for a subset of patients, this may be the case.
Absolutely agree. That's a study from Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Centre that was looking at the single agent PD-1 dostarlimab in the deficient mismatch repair locally advanced rectal cancer has really hit the headlines. The efficacy that's been reported is truly unprecedented, with 100% complete clinical response in the first 14 patients treated. You've got to take a moment, I think, with that data, despite its small size, despite a clear need for longer follow-up. There's indications that physicians already may begin to adopt this practice, knowing that the standard of care options remain should a patient recur or progress. And it's really not surprising the amount of attention this paper has received when you think that the usual treatment of chemoradiation plus or minus surgery can really result in life-altering changes for the patient. It's a really exciting time.
Phenomenally exciting. I think even over the weekend it percolated into the BBC News. It was on various channels, so it is exciting, and it's exciting to see how this will all advance. So anyway, time is of the essence, so I want to thank personally our oncology leads Siobhan and Lindsay for your brilliant dedication and work on this. Thanks to the medical profession for their fantastic minds and hard work that keep this science moving forward, and thanks to you, our listeners. Of course, as always, if you'd like to discuss your oncology needs in more detail, or even have a brainstorm in terms of what some of this data may mean for you and your business issues, or anything you'd like to discuss, please reach out to Lindsay and Siobhan. We really do love a great brainstorm and, of course, writing a proposal. So thank you ever so much. On behalf of everybody from Blueprint Partnership, thank you and have a lovely day.